Hi, everyone. My name is Jabari Owens-Bailey. I work here at the museum as a curatorial education program manager, and I am here to introduce Maree Clarke. She is from the Yorta Yorta, Wamba Wamba, Mutti Mutti, Boonwurrung woman who grew up in northwest Victoria, mainly in Mildura on the banks of the Maree River. Maree has been practicing as an artist and living in Melbourne for the last 3 decades. She is a pivotal figure in the reclamation of Southeast Australian Aboriginal art practices. And she's reviving elements of the Aboriginal culture that were lost or laying dormant after the effects of colonization on her people. And Maree is together, she's bringing back a lot of the traditional ways of working, and some of that is with possum skin cloaks, and then also contemporary designs of kangaroo teeth necklaces, river reed necklaces, and string headbands adorned with kangaroo teeth, and all of these traditional materials as well as contemporary materials. She has long held ambitions to facilitate cross-cultural dialogue about the ongoing effects of colonization, while simultaneously providing space for the Aboriginal community to engage and mourn the impact of dispossession and loss. So her work is very important, and we are really happy and proud to have her here doing a residency at Museum of Glass. So Maree is going to give a talk, and then after that, a brief question and answer session. So if you see something during the talk that you have questions about, hold it in your mind till the end, and I'm sure she can answer whatever questions you have. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I generally title these talks Bloodlines, which is like my connection to country, culture and place. And a lot of the materials that I use for my work is from the countries where I've grown up in. And what I'm going to do is flick to the first, it's a little sort of 3-minute, 2-minute doco, which will like set the scene for all of the other work that you will see. I just think it's so important to pass on cultural knowledge. It's who you are, it's where you're from, it's part of you, it's part of me. And the only way that I can do that is through art. Every time I'm involved in a new exhibition, it's like, how do you recreate culture in a really positive, respectful way and put it out there? My work now is about recreating objects and items from museums, things that haven't been made for a long, long time, learning the cultural practices that haven't been practiced for many, many years, and passing that cultural knowledge on to my family. I think it's about, you know, letting people know that we're here, we're still here, and we still have, you know, all of this knowledge and all of this information that we're still passing on to our children that have been passed on for thousands and thousands of generations. I love to involve my family. You know, that will hopefully inspire them. They will learn along the way, and they can then pass that on to their children. Even though I do all of this research for my art practice, I don't feel like I need to find out who I am and who I'm connected to, because I already know that. I've grown up with a really strong sense of who I am, who my family are, where our country is. I am so connected to my family and my country that I'm not searching for anything. I just want to make art. So yes, 3 decades I've been sort of making and creating and sharing our stories with my family, doing art mentoring, so with the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency, which is an organisation that have placed children in foster care, and it's about keeping those kids connected to culture. So I basically show them all of the different works that I do and tell them they can take anything they like and make it their own. This is an image of my niece walking on country. We're out looking for kangaroo teeth. So those beautiful kangaroo tooth necklaces that you will get to see is basically us driving for hundreds and hundreds of kilometres, stopping at every dead kangaroo and pulling their teeth out. And this is how I first started making jewellery and painting identical sort of earrings, brooches, supplying boutique shops in Melbourne, and basically going from this to echidna quills, which is like your porcupine but much smaller quills, boiling them up and making these beautiful body adornments, and then using natural materials from the environment. And then moved to Melbourne to paint the first green and gold tram to hit the tracks of Melbourne with my brother Peter Clarke. And just some of the different materials that I use, like quandong seeds, which is a fruit that you can eat, but I use the nut inside the fruit to make jewellery, and then river reeds, which is what the glass river reed canoe is based on. But these ones have been cut into a few centimetres. A public art commission, it's roughly about 40 metres of footpath, and I made, I think, about 12 big serpents and inlaid into the footpath. Then I trained with a photographer and exhibited with 3 other Aboriginal women photographers in Melbourne. And then while doing this, I also took my family on that journey and taught them photography and the whole printing process in the darkroom. And then I was a curator at the city of Port Phillip in a suburb in Melbourne, and the Weary We Homeborn exhibition was basically the exhibitions that put Victorian Aboriginal art on the map. We got a 3-ton truck and went to every Aboriginal community in Victoria collecting artworks and curated 5 incredible shows, and the National Gallery of Victoria started acquiring Victorian Aboriginal artworks. Because when people talk about Aboriginal art, their first thought generally, first and foremost, is dot paintings or the cross-hatching from up north. And us down south barely get a look in when you're talking about Victorian Aboriginal art. The book on the right, sort of like reading a map, is a book that you can download from the internet. And the book on the left, Power and the Passion, talks about the return of the skeletal remains that Melbourne University and the Melbourne Museum held. And Jim Berg, Ron Caston and Ron Merkel they got an injunction against Melbourne University and the museum to stop skeletal remains coming to the US for exhibition in the late 70s, early 80s. Those skeletal remains were collected from burial sites along the Murray-Darling rivers and were then, after the injunction, were then parcelled and given back to communities for reburial. So George Murray Black and some other people had collected the skeletal remains along with the Kopi mourning caps. So the power and the passion is about that journey. Then I sort of got involved in doing some other sort of artist in schools projects and created these supersized mosaics working with the school kids. This is another permanent public installation in Melbourne, down by the river, and it's called Scar a Stolen Vision. And my poles are the black, white and red ones, which talk about the stolen generations and the government policy of removing Aboriginal children from their families. This is a big 9mm thick stainless steel feather. It's about, I think about 6-7 metres. In Oakley, it talks about Bunjil, our creator bird, flying over the land. A feather falls from his chest, lands on the earth, and creates habitats for the animals to come back. There's a clump of frog eggs, 3mm thick spun stainless steel. And the growling grassland frog is an endangered species of frog. And we had sort of all these frog eggs clumped together and talks about new life, new beginnings, new communities. And this is a big 3-metre bronze kangaroo apple with a mourning daisy etched into it. And this talks about the return of the eels. So when the eels leave Australia and go up to the Coral Sea to spawn, they then travel back to where their parents lived and grew. And so the kangaroo apple represents that. And when the eels came back, there'd be a big corroboree on the beach, and women would weave a net of sort of a daisy chain out of the mourning daisies down on the beach. This is sort of a new commission that I did last year with Trent Jansen. So these are cut river reeds with my beautiful sticks from country, all cast in bronze, outside a church in Melbourne. And this one's cast river reeds, and it's sort of a Wurundjeri one, which is one of the tribes, and Boonwurrung sort of sitting having a conversation. Some glass sticks that Canberra Glassworks had fabricated for me. So these are also the sticks that I also use in my installations. This is in a light well near the new Federal Police building. This is a major projection work that I did with my great nephew, Mitch Marnie. And a lot of these projects, I take my family on the journey, and especially my great nephew, Mitch Marnie, who I've been working with for the last 3 years. This is a set design for a photographic hologram that talks about my grandmother's lounge room pre-1967. So before 1967, Aboriginal people weren't even considered citizens in our own country. So I had to scour the internet looking for all these different objects and items and brought them all and created this set design. Took 1,500 frames, sent the images to Lithuania. They sent back a huge piece of acrylic, that black acrylic that once was lit. It looked like you could step into this space. And they're the only people I know that make photographic holograms. And this one is a 3D photograph, a lenticular print that I also get printed here in the US, because we don't print them as big back home in Australia. Now, I'm not sure if this will work. I can't get that to... Oh, they're supposed to have this little movement in them. So this talks about a time when my family and I lived behind a mission, and a mission is probably like your reserves here for First Nations people. And my family and I lived in a tent, and my bed was a suitcase. This is pre-1967. So the 3D photographs is basically layers of photographs, so you can get that movement in them. Installation of my ritual and ceremony series, the black and white photographs. And this is Ancestral Memories at the National Gallery of Victoria last year. And the National Gallery was built in 1861. And in 2022, I was the first Aboriginal woman with traditional ties to country to have a solo exhibition at the National Gallery. So that's taken quite a few years to sort of get that happening, but it's happening. And now the National Gallery are commissioning Aboriginal artists from Victoria to make a possum skin cloak for their collection, and commissioning other artists to do other incredible works. So their collections are building with First Nation artists' works. And these are two of the beautiful eel traps that Canberra Glassworks had fabricated for me. And I was commissioned by Melbourne University to make a new artwork for their building that they were renovating. And next to the building was a big lake full of fish and eels. And at the first meeting, they asked what I would make, and I said, oh, how about a glass eel trap made in 20 sections, sort of at 3 metres. So I flew to Canberra with a little piece of plastic and my ideas, and they created this for me, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And then I supersized things, like these are river reed necklaces, 50 metres long, with feathers that we also collect from roadkill. And it talks about the scale of loss of land, language and cultural practices. And then this is some of the research that I do around the world. So I just travel to different museum collections at museums that hold our material cultural items. This one's in Florence. This is a British museum. Saffron Walden. And I'm able to now identify the different Southeast Australian Aboriginal objects held in these collections. And the shield on the right with the wooden hand little bits are some of the ones that Gabe and the team have made for me in clear glass. This is Berlin. Berlin again. And my interpretation of some of those shields. And then these images was the inspiration for me to make the kangaroo tooth necklaces. And these two particular ones are held in the at Oxford University at Pitt Rivers Museum. And basically this is what we find before we actually take the jaw of the kangaroo, and I photograph every single tooth and jaw that I take in the hope that one day I'll make a book of the making of a kangaroo tooth necklace. And then my husband Nicholas takes the sinew out of the tail of a kangaroo. So the whole thing is made with kangaroo leather, kangaroo teeth, and the sinew from the tail of a kangaroo. And this particular necklace is 123 teeth for an exhibition at the National Gallery of Victoria. And these ones are 75 teeth. And this is Magnolia wearing this necklace for a Vogue photo shoot. And there's also an 18-carat gold-plated kangaroo tooth that I get printed in New York. And then Canberra Glassworks fabricated some glass crystal kangaroo teeth and some black glass crystal kangaroo teeth. And then this is another jewellery collection that I sort of created with the National Gallery for Design Week. And basically it sold out on the opening night. It was pretty incredible. And that I'd given Balaji, who created the 3D files for me, a feather, an echidna quill, a kangaroo tooth, and the echidna quill, yeah. And they 3D printed everything. It was so fantastic. The image on the left is a traditional river reed necklace that was given to people passing through country as a sign of safe passage and friendship. I've then, of course, supersized it to a 50-metre river reed necklace and photographed Kimberly wearing it. And this is 5 that I had in an exhibition at the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra. And all the feathers that we use in all of these necklaces are all from roadkill. And these are glass river reeds that Canberra Glassworks fabricated for me with little glass seed pods that I fill with ochre or charcoal from country. The glass eel trap. And then after this one, Canberra Glassworks invited me to have an exhibition up there, and they made me the second eel trap. So the first one I find sort of very feminine and light, and this one I find really thick and sort of heavy and masculine. Oh, don't know why that's up there again. Some coolamans. Coolamans are vessels that people use to carry baby food, water, and different things, and they're baby possum skin cloaks up the top. This was for a hospital. So the idea around this is that when a new baby was born, they could be wrapped in the possum skin cloak, placed in the coolaman and photographed, rather than having the pink or sort of blue bunny rug that they tend to wrap the children in. Also during colonisation, rather than having your council of elders, it was imposed the title king and queen in some of the tribes and given these breastplates. And so I've taken that and made some ceramic breastplates and photographed Nicholas wearing them and sort of made them our own with kangaroo teeth and feathers. An installation called Remember Me. This was just earlier this year down the coast, and I had 44 canoe scar shapes with all the different language groups of Victoria, and printed in the middle was the language word in bold, and at night those 3 words glowed in the dark, and I had a language speaker whispering the name 3 times. So it was that thing around, say my name 3 times and you will remember me. And it was just so beautiful and haunting to hear the whispers of country just, throughout the bush. It was beautiful. Another new commission that launched this year. This is 9 video screens, about 2 metres by a metre, for one of the major buildings in Melbourne. A new eel trap that's being fabricated as I'm here in the US for a kids' playground. This is part of a 100 square metre graphics for a children's play area where all the white bits in that will be mirror, so when the kids walk down the passageway to their new library, they'll be able to see themselves and be eyeballing the emus and kangaroos and birds and things. Oh, some big giant serpents and barriers. New carpets that I designed for this new children's library So this talks about the 7 seasons of the Kulin Nation, and each of the animals and plants have been sort of colour-coded, so the children, when they go into their library, will be able to eventually identify what season they'll be in. Part of my ritual and ceremony series. A vinyl that's in the children's library. This is the adult carpet area, which is probably about as big as maybe twice the size of this space here. So this talks about the 5 clans of the Kulin Nation, so we've got maps of country on the floor. My husband's Coolaman that we're casting in cast iron for the terrace of this new library. It's a very beautiful thing. River reeds, so my husband Nicholas, my nephew Mitch Marnie, and our friend Pete, who documented the process of the making of this river reed canoe. And it's 7.5 metres and will be cast in bronze for a new promenade in Melbourne, and it'll be installed in 2026. It took about 10 days to make this thing. And then probably for the last 2 months, I've been going into Melbourne University looking at river reeds under the microscope. So these are the roots up to the stem of the river reed, and these will be for a new exhibition when I get back to Melbourne, opening on the 30th of June. And I'll get printed roughly around 245 images, 30 by 30 centimetres, and then also create 2 projections from this. So I've got another team back home working on all of this for me. But they're absolutely beautiful, and some of the river reeds still have the husk around them. Some have been cut sideways, and some of them just look like Central Desert paintings from, you know, from communities up north. This is some research around the mourning practices of Aboriginal people. In 2010, I was invited to be part of an exhibition around life, death and spirituality, and I didn't know anything about my own traditional mourning practices. So after doing lots of research, finding out about the Kopi mourning caps, which is like a clay cap that you would wear on your head weighing up to 7 kilos, and wearing it until it either fell off your head or you felt like your mourning period was over, you would take it off your head and place it on the grave and you were free to move on. And these are some of the historical Kopi mourning caps held in the Museum of Victoria, and these were collected along with the skeletal remains, but the Kopi mourning caps didn't get sent back to country, and I don't know why. So after doing all the research, I worked with 38 Aboriginal women to represent the 38 tribes of Victoria, collected the sticks from country where this practice was from, sitting on a bed of red dirt, which is also the country that I'm from, and I got the stories of loss, sorrow and mourning from the women and had it scrolling on the ground in front of the work. And yeah, it was quite an emotional piece even to make. And then I ended up working with 45 Aboriginal men. And again, I designed all of those T-shirts to represent the scars that men would wear during the mourning, their mourning period, which is, you know, the cuts on their chest. And again, I went to the Melbourne Museum to learn how to make scars to stick on the men's chest, but I was working with extra small to 7XL and all different body shapes and sizes. So I just designed like 7 T-shirts and the guys could choose what they wanted to wear. And then I started doing Kopi mourning workshops, and then I'd also travelled it to Italy, the Ritual and Ceremony series, London, Cuba, that's Cuba again, and the Melbourne Museum. So with a particular work like that, like people just get it. And I don't speak Spanish, but the people over there got it. These are all my nieces and nephews that were performing at the Melbourne Museum opening. And this one's called Born of the Land, where I was buried under 300 kilos of dirt and sort of rose up from the ground. It was an incredible thing to do. And this is part of the Possum Skin Cloak project. There are only 6 historical cloaks left in the world, and there's one here in the US at the Smithsonian in Washington. And there's fragments in Berlin and a couple of pieces in the UK. And so through this major revival project, we've travelled to every Aboriginal community in Victoria and through New South Wales and South Australia, teaching possum skin cloak making, because everybody would have had a possum skin cloak. And when you died, you were wrapped and buried in your cloak, which is why there were, and I don't know how those 6 sort of became part of people's collections, but they are. But it's a great thing to be able to learn this practice and give it back to Aboriginal communities who are now using them in graduations, for schools, for funerals, for different events. And then I went to Italy and did an artist residency. And because it's a really big, huge textile community, and I wanted to make a possum skin cloak. Well, they were all up in arms about me taking possum pelts there when they're wearing their mink coats. It was all a bit crazy, really. So we ended up making a textile possum skin cloak. And this is part of the revival process and sort of the end product of working with 38 or 35 of the 38 language groups for the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. And this is one that we made last year in Massachusetts at South Hadley at Mount Holyoke College. And they've acquired this cloak for their collection. And this is sort of a possum skin cloak that we had made for my brother before he passed away 3 years ago. And Sydney John got to use this cloak, and when he died, we went into the funeral home and wrapped him in it. And again with Len, when he died, we had family and friends come around, mark his cloak, went and wrapped him in it, and held his funeral service at the Museum of Victoria. And I got the 5 elders of the Kulin Nation to come and do a smoking ceremony. His coffin was painted by a man from country where he's from, a Gunai man, and the elders did just the most beautiful ceremony for him. And then he was sent back to country. So it was the first time the Melbourne Museum had like a contemporary sending somebody home apart from the ancestral skeletal remains. And pretty much that's a bit of a snapshot of what I've been doing over the last 30 plus years. And yeah, to be able to be here and have Gabe and Nick and Sarah sort of, I just figure if you can dream something, somebody must be able to make that dream. And I've been dreaming for a lot of years about making these particular glass shields. And they are just exquisite. And also the glass river reed canoe, which I tried to get one made for my solo exhibition at the National Gallery of Victoria. But because I was making all these other works and like a 70 pelt possum skin cloak, and they're usually around 30 pelts, that was just like too big a task to do. And I still have no idea how they would make that at 3 metres for me, but maybe one day that'll happen. And I think the other things that we've made is a parrying shield, which is quite a narrow, long shield, but that's still sort of in the oven, just sort of cooling down. And I think after lunch we're going to make some like supersized clear glass kangaroo teeth, which I think will just be a very beautiful thing to look at. So any questions? Yeah. Oh, I should take that. Well, I think it's different for different communities, but for what I do and researching and even travelling and looking at museum collections and being able to take my family on those journeys with me is an amazing thing. But there is a project that I would love to set up, which is because we have like thousands of objects overseas in collections. They will never ever come back home. But it would be great to take some elders and young people to visit those objects and items in those museum collections, because for me, when I see these museum collections and exhibitions in museums, it still looks like the black fella standing on the rock with the family with his spear and, you know, that whole time stood still thing, where we are one of the oldest continuous living cultures in the world. And if we don't change and adapt, culture will die. That's why I love doing things like the glass shields, the glass canoe. It's still cultural practice, but using different mediums, but still telling the same stories. And so if you can get that through to people, and especially these young ones coming through, you know, because a lot of young artists, especially the kids coming through, do a lot of dot paintings. You know, it's easy, it's quick, it's effective, but it's not traditionally from Victoria. That's from Central Australia. So if you were to take, and I did a project with new release prisons a couple of years ago, and you can tell prison art, it's a particular style of art. So I took away the canvas, the paint, and I said, how are you going to tell your story through art? So we had a guy making like a mosaic kangaroo this big, you know, with a fishing pole, talking about his family and travelling and fishing. He loved fishing. Another guy who did like a big 7-metre carved snake that was mounted on the wall and had beautiful wooden round frames made to represent sort of his children, and there were photographs in there. So yeah, it's about getting people to tell stories in a different way, I guess. Yeah, love it. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
What's the state of the possum population in Australia?
So Australian possums are protected. Every Australian animal is protected, unless you're an Aboriginal person and you're able to go and get a possum and eat it. I'm a vegan myself. But we have to get our possum pelts from New Zealand. And yeah, we have to buy them back at a song. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Yeah. Oh, hi. Yeah. Yeah. I mainly focus on stories from my family, or the different regions that I'm connected to. So I'm connected to mobs in Tasmania, Victoria and New South Wales. So from those groups, I'm able to make work that relates back to country. Yeah, yeah. Hey. In art, my first project. So I didn't train as an artist. I dropped out of school at 15. And then my brother, who was a brilliant artist, and he was a performer, dancer, educator, did a whole range of things, had given me my first little pieces of timber to make jewellery. And I think my first pair of earrings, I must have wiped that design off like 10 times. I thought nobody could ever see that. And then I sold that pair of earrings for like $25. And that was in about 1988, 89. And so I made a really good living just making jewellery and supplying those shops. So it went from painting with a brush with 2-3 hairs to painting that tram. And it took my wrists like a couple of weeks to get used to that. Yeah. Yeah. No more questions? All good? Cool. Well, I'll be here for the rest of the afternoon if you guys are too. No worries. No questions over there? You good?